Young people, I think you're the grandest people in all of the world. I really do. As one little boy said, I wouldn't trade you for chocolate-covered crackers. And I mean that tonight. I love you for a lot of different reasons. I love to speak to you for a lot of different reasons. One of them is because you love crazy statements and crazy jokes like I do. Such ones as, my girl has a winning smile. The trouble is she has a losing face. Or as one boy said, every time I meet a girl who can cook like my mother, she looks like my father. One boy said, you say your heart belongs to me, so why does the rest of you keep going out with other guys? I love you also because you like love and enjoy love. And I like poems about love. Two of my favorites I'd like to give to you tonight. The first one is called Togetherness. Doesn't that sound tender? It goes this way. They walked down the lane together. The sky was covered with stars. They reached the gate in silence, and he lifted for her the bars. She neither smiled nor thanked him, because she really didn't know how. For he was only a farmer's lad, and she was a Jersey cow. Another one of my favorites. I did my best to show him how to hold his lips just so. I told him to be ready when I gave the signal go. He puckered his lips and closed his eyes and did as he was told. But it's hard to learn to whistle when a lad is 3 years old. It's often interesting to see what young people are thinking about when you're saying things like this. Young people, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening, to this auditorium full of young people. I hope tonight that the admonitions and the encouragements will be rich indeed, and that because you believe they're right, you will want to try them. In 1 Corinthians, the 6th chapter, verse 1, it begins, I dare any of you. And this is the topic I would like to speak to you about. I dare any of you. Some of you as boys, when you were growing up, would be out on a playground at school, and some boy would get mad at you because he didn't like the way you played ball or something, and he ran up to you and said, I dare you to fight. Well, this didn't bother you too much. But if this didn't work, he'd say to you, I double dare you. And this created a little more fire within you. It still didn't make you fight. But brother, when he finally said, I double dog dare you, man, that's when the fighting started. They often tell us, the business world does, that we only use 5% of the potential that we have. Boys and girls, I'm interested in you being the greatest possible people you can be. I'm interested in you living the greatest Christian lives you can live. And that's why I speak to you tonight on this subject. You are just what you want to be and nothing else. Good young people do not happen by accident. They are made. They are the product of their environment. And you tonight are not good or bad by accident. You're that way because someone has helped you to be that way, and because you've helped yourself to be that way. But tonight, would you not take a dare to be the best possible person you can be? A boy sat in a classroom one day. He was the bully of the group. He led the gang that made fun of the teacher and made fun of parents and did everything else that they weren't supposed to do. He always liked to say very kind things about his teacher behind her back when she couldn't hear. He was a peaked and hollow-chested young man. Missed school a lot because he was sick. Really didn't make good grades because he didn't care that much about grades. But one day a teacher walked down the aisle next to that boy. He was making fun of her and making faces behind her back. She got past him. And all of a sudden she turned around and she said, I dare you to be the healthiest boy in this class. It scared the life out of him. He didn't know what to do. But all of a sudden he began to think, what can I do with myself? He began to lift weights, to sleep right. And that boy not only became the healthiest boy in that class, but one of the healthiest men anywhere. Because one day someone gave him a dare. I want to dare you to do some things tonight. It's up to you as to whether you take them, but they will be challenges which I offer to you. Number one, I dare you tonight to count your blessings. I really believe that even though people look at young people as juvenile delinquents a lot, that we are the richest people in the world. Young people, how much do you really have? If you were to take time out to count what you have, how much or how many things could you count? If I were to allow tonight 1 solid minute for you to do nothing but count what you have, how many blessings could you count? Trying this with a group of teenagers one night, one young man counted 76 things in 1 minute that were a blessing to him from God. But another boy counted 72 times in one day that he griped. Do you gripe the most, or do you count your blessings the most? We are the richest people in all of the world. Tonight, if you own a television set in your home, you're in the top 5% of the world's riches. If your folks own a car, you're even above that as far as the world's values are concerned. And because you have clothes to put on your back each day, because you have food to put in your mouth, and because you have opportunities to drive a car or even to date a girl, these make you the richest people in the world. What do you owe? What if tonight God sent you a bill for everything that He's given to you? What do you owe God, you ask? Suppose He sent this bill. $100,000 for the sun upon the hill. $2,000 for the little brook that runs along the way. $500 for the nighttime and $1,000 for the day. $600 for the little birds that trill and chirp and sing. $600 for the tiny flowers which tell us it is spring. These are the bills which every one of every clime forget. If God should charge you what you owe, you'd always be in debt. Today upon a bus, I saw a lovely girl with golden hair. She seemed so gay, I envied her and wished that I were half so fair. I watched her as she rose to leave and saw her hobble down the aisle. She had one leg and wore a crutch, but as she passed, a smile. Oh God, forgive me when I whine. I have 2 legs. The world is mine. Later on, I bought some sweets. The boy that sold them had such a charm. I thought I'd stop and talk a while. If I were late, 'twould do no harm. And as we talked, he said, "Thank you, sir, you've been so kind. It's nice to talk with folks like you because, you see, I'm blind. Oh God, forgive me when I whine. I have 2 eyes. The world is mine." Later, walking down the street, I met a boy with eyes so blue, but he stood and watched the others play. It seemed he knew not what to do. I paused, and then I said, "Why don't you join the others, dear?" But he looked straight ahead without a word, and then I knew he could not hear. Oh God, forgive me when I whine. I have 2 ears. The world is mine. 2 legs to take me where I'd go. 2 eyes to see the sunset's glow. 2 ears to hear all I should know. Oh God, forgive me when I whine. I'm blessed indeed. The world is mine. Teenagers, little 4-year-old boy taught me what blessings really were and what they are. A friend in high school, a boy of my acquaintance, had passed away because of an accident. I went to the home to see what I could do to help the family. When I went there was no screen door on the outside, and the divan where I sat had holes in it beside me. And I asked the mother as I sat there, looking at the barren floor, looking at what they didn't have, I said to the mother, "What can I do to help? Can I do anything?" As we often ask. And she said, "No, Don, there's nothing you can do. We don't have too much money or too many provisions, but yet I don't believe there's really anything you can do." But there was a little 4-year-old boy, his little brother, that did not know any better than to tell me really what they needed. And I never will forget the face of that little boy as he ran out and said, "Mr. Don, do you know what you can do?" And I said, "No, what can I do?" He said, "You can buy a casket for my brother." They didn't even have the money to buy a casket for the son. And the little boy didn't know any more than to tell me this. And when I got home, I got down on my knees and prayed to my Father in heaven and said, "Oh God, forgive me. Forgive me when I have not realized what I really have in this world." I believe tonight that we're the richest people in all of the world. Because when Paul wrote to the Corinthians, he said that even though Jesus was rich, He became poor for our sakes, that we through His poverty might be rich. And that every blessing we have tonight has come down from the Heavenly Father. The beautiful Psalms tell us what handiwork we have at the hand of our Almighty Father. And it's all because He desired to give it to us. Jesus went to the cross because He wanted to give His life for us. He wanted to have our sins taken away. He wanted you to be a Christian, a child of God. And what greater blessing could there be? If I were to stop now, which I will not do, but in an imaginary sense, and give you a solid minute to think just exactly what you have, how many blessings could you count? Try it at your home. Take a piece of paper even. Draw a line down the middle of it, and on one side, list the blessings that you have. And on the other side, list the gripes that you have. And see which one weighs out the most. Would you try it? I dare you tonight to count your blessings and to see really how rich you are. Number two, I dare you to do another thing. I dare you to be pure and wholesome. In the mind of the world, this has become a situation which is not so good. Most people really don't want to be pure and wholesome. They would rather follow the crowd and do what the people want to do because they feel like that makes you the most popular. Young people never believe that following the crowd will be the thing that is right. Realize that there are always more people around a 5 and 10 cent store than there are around a jewelry store. The most people around a thing do not determine its value. In fact, you may be the only person in the world who's trying to do right on a certain thing, but you know that you have that obligation unto God. Boys and girls, tonight you can be pure and wholesome in spite even of the way you look on the outside. Now, some of us are not the prettiest things that ever lived, and we have to come to that realization. I used to think I was the greatest thing that had ever happened. That actually I was God's gift to women, and I just couldn't see why any girl wouldn't want to date me as I grew up. But after 14 years of dating, and still not married, I changed my mind. Young people, to be pure and wholesome, it's not dependent upon what you are on the outside. Even though I want you to be as pretty as you can. And when I look at some of these girls out in the audience tonight, it reminds me, as I have mentioned before, it reminds me of All-American Beauty Red Roses. And then I think of myself, a potted plant. Well, young people, this is the way it is a lot of times. We may not be so pretty on the outside, but that's not what counts. With others and with God. Do you know someone in the school who's not so pretty on the outside, but yet who's just as fine and wonderful and good as can be? You can take 49 baths if you want to with Grandma's Lye soap, but that doesn't do the job. Being pretty on the inside, being a beautiful person in the beauty of holiness is the most important thing. Oh, sometimes we think we're the greatest thing that has ever happened, and we try to show off with how we are on the inside. You know, boys build muscles and girls put everything in the world on their face to try to help this situation. Did you ever look at the back of a funny book where it says, "Are you a 98-pound weakling?" and kick sand in his face? And so he said to himself, that 200-pound bully is not going to kick sand in my face. And so he ordered those weights, and he lifted those weights daily. He worked out with them. And finally he got up to 200 pounds, a strong man. And he went to the beach, and a 400-pound bully kicked sand in his face. Always in life there's going to be someone just a little bigger as far as muscles or looks or fame or money are concerned. But it really depends on what you're like on the inside. It even reminds me of a boy who did the same thing with this coupon. He was a 98-pound weakling, and he sent in this coupon to build himself up. He worked out with these weights for 3 months. After he finished the course, he sent them a letter, and it said, "Have finished course. Please send muscles." Well, this is like a lot of us. Because in spite of what we try to do on the outside, we really can't improve it too much. But there's one thing you always can improve, and that is what you are on the inside. Reminds me of that little poem. "O Emmeline, will you be mine? My heart unto you hollers. Although your mug looks like a rug, you have $1,000,000. And even though some people are rich and don't have so much on the outside, we think, boy, that's the thing that counts. If they've got money, it doesn't matter how they are. If they have a Lincoln Continental sitting in the driveway, that's what's big dog stuff, and that's the one I want to go with. Solomon, after having everything in the world, was able to say to young people as well as old, "Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole of man." This is the all of man, to do right, to fear God, and to keep His commandments. And being pure and wholesome, it requires a lot of things. It requires a pureness of thought. One boy said, "But I can't keep bad thoughts from running through my mind." Well, young people, you sometimes can't keep the birds from flying over your head, but you can keep them from building a nest in your hair. And when you think bad thoughts, if you'll all of a sudden try to cleanse those thoughts and keep trying to cleanse them over and over, gradually these bad thoughts will leave you. And you can constantly put those things out of your mind. One boy one day was told by his mother and father, "Go down to the brook and get a bucket of water." And so he picked up a basket, like an old cane-bottom chair. He took it down to the brook and he filled it with water, but when he got back up to the house, he didn't have any water. And they said, "Foolish young man, you don't have any water in your basket." He said, "No, but I got it cleaned out." And a lot of times, even though you may not remember a sermon for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or something that you read which was good, you don't remember it for a month. Yet when you read it, you got your basket cleaned out. And if you'll come to Bible school and church services, if you'll think the right things and follow the right patterns, you'll constantly get this basket cleaned out, your mind. And then you'll have the right kind of thoughts. Solomon tells us that as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And the thoughts that you have within you, even though mother and daddy don't know what they're like, even though maybe your boyfriend or girlfriend doesn't know what they're like, even your closest friends, maybe even your diary doesn't even know. Still, that's what makes you, and that's where your treasure will be, is where your thoughts are, young people. Make those thoughts as clean as they can be. Because what starts up here in the mind usually comes out down here at the mouth. As one woman said, when they asked her how did she always say the right things, she said that she always tasted her words before she spit them out. Do you think the right kind of thoughts? And then do you think about those words before you spit them out, young people? Did you ever just listen to yourself talk? Do you ever curse? Do you ever use words that really aren't curse words, but they're so close to it that you can hardly count them anything else? Did you ever just listen to yourself say these? Or someone doesn't want to curse, and so he just clips off a bunch of bywords, and these become a part of him. And you know that almost every time he gets ready to say something, a few of these are going to come out. They must. It's just him. There are only about 3 reasons why you would ever curse. One reason is that you may have a habit of it, and you don't even notice it. Some people develop themselves to say these words over so many times that it just becomes a part of them and they don't even realize what they're saying. And they need a tape recording of themselves. Another reason is that young people try to be big. The simplest words have the greatest force. When Jesus spoke in the Sermon on the Mount, His words were very simple. The sentences were constructed in such an easy way. But these comprise the greatest thoughts which have ever come from the lips of man. Young people, don't try to just impress someone and be big. Number 3, make a bigger vocabulary so you won't have to use these words. Some guys have told me that they just can't quit cursing. But I doubt that. Do you know why? If there is a girl they want to go with, and finally they get that first date with that girl, they know that they have to be on their best behavior when they pick her up. Do you hear them clipping off these words? Oh no. They are Prince Charming, and everything they do is just right. They even open the door for her. They might not lay their coat down so she can walk over a mud puddle on it, but they'll do some things that they've never done before, and above all, they're not going to curse in front of her because they want a second date with her. I've seen a lot of little cubs, boys, who can tame a lot of big old lions. And this is one reason I believe that if you want to quit it, you can. But it all depends upon you. There are probably about 19 dirty, filthy jokes for every clean one. And most of them the people tell, if you're going to repeat them, you have to run them through the washing machine a few times so you can tell them again. But young people, look for the ones that will really impress everyone and make a better person of everyone that listens to them. Your language toward others is so very important. Do you call your mother and daddy the old lady and the old man? Or what do you say about your teachers at school? Do you write signs on the building saying the prison and the inmates are here and the guards watch over us all of the time? Quite some choice statements are found on schools, but you notice that everybody always does them at night. They don't dare do them in the day. They're afraid they'll get caught at it. But the thing that's interesting is how young people talk about their teachers at school. One boy said about the teachers in school, old teachers never die, they just smell that way. Another boy said about the teacher that he had in school, she's all right in her place, but it just ain't been dug yet. The only trouble was the boy got caught saying that, and the Board of Education, which was applied to him, did not feel so good. He wished he would not have said it. But we're always so kind. One boy walked into a high school classroom one day, and the fad in this class was to wear the slacks down as low, or the blue jeans down as low as they could wear them. He walked in with his blue jeans down low, trying to really be someone. The teacher said to him as he walked in that door, "You pull up those pants." He said, "I don't tell you how to wear your clothes." It wasn't so funny though, because he got kicked out of school. I saw that boy not too long ago, and he wasn't so pleased about that one statement that he had made because he was dismissed from the high school. And it wasn't so much fun when he could not get a job because he had not graduated. He wished that he would have gone on. We try to impress someone by being big, but sometimes in only a minute or 5 minutes, we can bring a tragedy upon our lives. I told a group of young people this afternoon that the growing process of doing good takes a long time. It's an uphill climb, and you have to work to be the gentleman you want to be or to be the lady that you'd like to be. Growth takes a long time, but tragedy usually only takes a minute. And if you want to try to be big and make fun of your mother and daddy or make fun of the school teachers, it'll never work. It will in your mind right then. You'll think, boy, I'm someone. I'm the greatest thing that's ever happened to this life. I'm the chief kid on the block. But it's not so fun later. It makes a difference then. Don't sass your mother and daddy. Obey them, as Ephesians 6 tells us. Be good to them. In fact, young people, do something for them that you've never done before. Go get a flower for your mother. Buy a flower. It'll only cost you 75 cents to buy a rose and take it to her. I know she'll wonder what you're up to. But at the same time, do something good for her. Girls, tell Daddy you love him. I know he'll wonder how much money you want or what boy you want to go out with. But go in and put your arm around him and say, Daddy, I love you for what you've done for me. I can hear these boys now. I ain't going to tell my old man I love him. Well, it takes a long time, girls and boys. It took me until college to get up the courage to write back to my folks and say, I love you, Mother and Dad. But of course they were furnishing the money then, and I almost had to. But yet, it took me that long to really learn to say, Mother and Daddy, I love you. And I want you to do the same. Be pure in your habits toward them. Be pure in your habits, your morals, your conduct. Isn't it big to smoke? Some of you in the audience remember grapevines. You used to go down on the creek and smoke grapevines. You would never try a cigarette, but boy, you couldn't beat those grapevines, because we got down there where no one could see us, and we just smoked those to beat the band. You remember the first time you ever tried to smoke a cigarette, boys? It wasn't so much fun, was it? One day, another young man and I got out of a movie. We were going to walk home about 7 blocks. We were walking down one block, and all of a sudden the boy looked down, and there was a big cigar, which had only been smoked a little way. He said, "Stop, Don. I want to smoke this cigar." I said, "All right." So we sat out on the curb together there, and Johnny started smoking the cigar. You know, it wasn't a minute until I looked over there. And literally that face was just as green could be. And then it turned white. And then it looked almost like a purple. And then in a minute he had to dismiss himself and go back around behind a building because he had gotten a little bit sick. And you know, Johnny tried that several times before he learned how to smoke. Oh, it took him a couple of months, and he hated every minute of learning. But finally he learned how. He wanted to do it to be big with the boys. It looked sharp to carry that pack around in your shirt pocket. And you look so big when you put that thing in your mouth and lit it up. Why do you smoke? A young man starts to smoke to prove he's a man. And 30 years later he tries to quit to prove the same thing. Boys, you know that a fine Christian girl you want to date would not want you to smoke. You know your mother and daddies don't want you to. You know your school teachers don't want you to. But you want to above anything else. The reason I would not have you smoke is because God has given you a body which He calls the temple, His temple. And when you do anything to hurt this temple, God is not pleased with you. And I don't care whether it's smoking or drinking or any other thing, it's not the best. A young man sat in a doctor's office one day as this throat doctor looked down his throat at a growth he had there. The doctor asked the young man, "Do you smoke?" He said, "No, I do not." The doctor said, "If you smoked, I can almost guarantee you that that growth would be cancer." It scared the life out of that boy. You know how I know? I was that boy. And that doctor sold me on the idea that smoking was not the best thing. Young people, if you ever have a doctor tell you, if you smoke, that will be cancer, it will shake you a little too. But how amazing it is that we can let some things like this get a hold on our life. And we won't give them up for anything. One man actually said, as I was in his hospital room, "I'll die before I give up my cigarettes." And I thought to myself, foolish, foolish man. Young people, I hope there is no habit you have that you could not give up if it so required it. If it hurt you in any way, that you would be pleasing to God and give it up. But it seems to be so big. Drinking seems to be the fad too. The boys say, "Come on, let's take a little nip. Just a little drink. Have one." And brother, that makes you a big man when you can down a can of Jacks. Even if you can down 2 or maybe even 3, that makes you a bigger man than ever. On a senior trip, one day, a boy almost drowned. Do you know why? Because the boys and girls went to New Orleans from a state that was dry. The sponsors would not take the responsibility if these kids would not follow them and follow the group as they went from place to place to view the city. These 2 boys didn't. They wanted to be big. They went off, got them some wine, got drunk. One of them decided he was going to sober the other one up, and when they came back to the motel, he put him in a bathtub and was going to run water over him to try to sober him up. He'd fed him tomato juice and everything he knew, and it didn't work. And so he was going to run water over his head, which he did. The only trouble was he was so drunk that he lost a lot of his mental faculties, and so he just left the boy there. And when the boy was found, the water was nose high, and probably in a few moments lost his life. You know how I know about this? It was my senior trip. There were only 2 young people out of a whole senior class who would not drink. There were some girls on this trip who were supposedly religious girls, but they got away from mother and daddy. They got away from teachers, and the gang encouraged them to drink, and they just had to do it the first time. There were probably 10 to 12 young people that drank for the first time in their life, just to be big, just to be big. Young people, I would that you would be in my office sometime when a girl, as one did last week, walked in and said, "Brother Don, I need help. My daddy is an alcoholic." And this happens frequently. If you would know of a young person, or if you would be one whose mother or daddy is an alcoholic, you know how bad it is. A young man one day was met by me for the first time. I went to his home. They had to keep the front door closed by putting a case knife in the framework of the door. This boy was building a fire in a bucket in the living room to keep warm by. Do you know why? Because his daddy was an alcoholic and had spent all the money, and they didn't have the money to pay the gas bill. Young people, we have millions of alcoholics in this country. Every one of them said the same thing that a lot of you say: "I'll never become an alcoholic. I can hold it. It'll never bother me, brother. I can drink as much as I want." And you're probably the person that's going to be that alcoholic. It's not big to drink because it hurts you. In fact, with the very first drink of whiskey which you take, boys or girls, the equilibrium in your mind is affected. You cannot think as well. You cannot decide as well. You are not as sharp as you were before it. And because of this, again, Romans 12, verse 1, which teaches us that our bodies should be a living sacrifice for Him, shows us that this thing is not the best. But you must decide it. Do you know of a boy or a girl who've lost their life because of alcohol? Because they got so drunk that they couldn't control a car and they ran off of a culvert or got hit by someone else when they were in the other lane? It's no fun. To preach the funeral of a boy, as I did, who had been run into by a drunk going 90 miles an hour on the wrong side of the road. Or to, above all, young people, have your best friend killed in a car accident by men who were drunk. I know about this. We do a lot of things to be big, to be fancy, to be the leader of the group, but it doesn't always work. Boys, do the right things. Be the man that you want to be and that you can be. Girls, be the finest young lady you can be. Number 3, I dare you to be proud at your wedding. I dare you to have those big tears of joy in your eyes. To know that you've kept yourself into that young man completely. Now, I want that big old boy, no matter if he's been the head of the track team, or if he's been the captain of the basketball team, or the best player on the football team, to be able to have big tears in his eyes too, because he knows that he is pure and ready for you. God doesn't fool around with things like this. He didn't fool around with David and Bathsheba when they did wrong. When God told them, "Thou shalt not commit adultery," He knew what He was talking about. But yet it has become a fancy of young people to have fun with love today. We just go about and just do the things we want to, and because someone else says, "Come on, let's go out and have a good time," we just follow what they want to do. Young people, the thrill of loveless thing because God has put it in you. And the beauty of love is wonderful, marvelous, because God is love and it is a part of Him which is in you. But when we learn to date too early, what happens? Girls and boys who date at 12 learn how to hold hands. And boy, it's fun. You love it. First time you've ever done it. But the thrill of it wears off before long. And then you want to put your arm around them. Boy, you can't beat that. But you know, when you learn this young, it even loses its thrill. And then you want that first kiss. I can tell as I look out over the audience who's had them too. But you want that first kiss. And believe it or not, I've even had mine. It took me all of the way through a Don Winslow serial and a Saturday afternoon movie to get it. And I had worked on it for 3 weeks as to how I was going to do it. And when I walked out of that show that evening, boy, I thought I was the greatest thing that had ever hit the world, because I got my first kiss. But young people, when you learn love too early, you begin to court heavy and do things you ought not to do. That even loses its thrill. And you want to do a lot more things that you have no business doing. God has made a beautiful relationship and a wonderful togetherness for marriage. But He didn't intend for it to be used before marriage. Love can be the most beautiful thing before marriage. And it can be the most beautiful thing after marriage. Or it can be the most tragic thing before marriage, the most tragic thing afterward, because you're engaged in a tragedy which you never will forget. If tonight I had a vase of 13 roses and 12 boys were seated on the front row, if I could take one of these roses and mess up the petals, cause it to lose part of its fragrance and to look sloppy, and then hand that vase to 12 boys and ask them to each take one rose, when I got back the vase, which rose do you think would be there? Surely the one that was messed up. And this is the way with dating and love. A boy or girl may want to date someone who's a little risque. When they get ready to get married, they want the finest person they can have. Boys do not want a girl who's been mishandled or misused. And likewise, boys, you have no right to sow your wild oats and to be anything other than that girl is expected to be either. You need to be the best that you can be. And I hope you will. But if you think that you can expect things out of the other person that you do not expect out of yourself, you're wrong, because you probably won't get that girl. I was looking for the perfect girl and I found her, but she was looking for the perfect boy. Be the thing that you want them to be. Be the right kind of person, and then that's the kind of person you'll have. Don't try sex too far. Don't be the one of every 3 girls who goes into marriage impure and unclean. But you be the person that when you leave a date that you're a better person than when you came. Be the person that when you leave that date that you have a conscience toward God and toward yourself that is clean. Be the person that has encouraged your date to be a bigger and better boy or girl, whichever one it might be. But when you get ready for marriage, be ready for it. Be mature. You can do it. She wants you just as much as you want her, if you're the right kind of person. I would that you would be proud at your wedding. Number 4, I dare you to do another thing. That is to be a leader of young people. Can you do that? Can you be a leader of young people? I wonder if you set your mind to it, if you could bring 1,000 people to Christ. You say, this sounds like so much. One man has baptized himself over 25,000 people. And you could be a leader of young people to the extent that you could bring them to Christ and let them know the Savior as you know Him. You could lead a gang if you want to in the right way. Wrong. It's the thing to do. One boy was trying to lead the others in his senior class the way that he knew they ought to go because he was a Christian, and he thought he had failed with one young man who really was the bully of the gang. But the day of the graduation, that big bully came up to him and literally with tears in his eyes said to him, I've tried to have the courage a long time to tell you that I think you're the finest boy I've ever met, and I wish I were half as good as you. And he turned around and walked away. A senior class president one day stood up before the class as they were going to gamble and take chances on how to go on a senior trip. That boy who was a Christian said that I do not believe it's right to gamble. If you decide to do it, it's up to you, but I will not. And he walked out. Everybody supposedly was against him until he walked out, and after he'd said this, the class decided not to do it. 5 people came up to him afterward and said, I didn't have the courage to say also that I don't believe it's right either. I didn't have the courage to stand up with the gang. I didn't have the courage to do what was right. And if you're a class president, or if you're a leader of a group, or if you're just a person, you can lead young people in the right way. There are little brothers or little sisters who watch you every step of the way. And I know you'd like to pay them off sometimes when a date comes and they begin to spout off everything they know. But you can be a leader of them. I always thought my brother was the greatest thing in the world. He was 3 years older than me. I wouldn't have told him for anything in the world. But I thought he was the greatest thing that had ever happened. And you are the greatest thing that has ever happened to a little brother or a little sister. And you can be a leader of young people if you want to. And you'll never be able to convince me, young people, that doing right and being right will not make you the most popular person in school with the most people. You may not be popular with a few, but with the most, you'll be popular. You be their leader. You be their ideal. Have character instead of being a character. You can be the finest boy in the school. Make accomplishments. Be a man. It's going to take steps to do it. You won't become a man in one day. It's like that little thing that was said, before I started chewing Levi Garrett snuff, I couldn't spit over my left shoulder. But now I chew Levi Garrett snuff and I spit all over my left shoulder. Well, if you make just a little accomplishment, that's the thing that counts. The only person you're in competition with is yourself, not anyone else. You're in competition with the way you were yesterday. Would you be a better person today than you were yesterday and lead people in the right way? There was one young man who wanted to be the right kind of example. And even though he had to work hard, he did just that. When he went to college, he put a V on his door. And all of the boys in the dorm wanted to know what that V stood for. And when the girls were told by the boys that he had this V upon his door, they said, "What is this?" And he would not tell them. And they asked him for 4 years of college, and he never explained it to them. But they didn't fail to understand when he graduated as the valedictorian of that college class. He decided when he went to college that he was going to be the valedictorian, and he was. And tonight, the most young people are not going to do right. You're going to have to set it in your heart that you want to be the best possible Christian you can be and lead the most young people to Christ. You can if you really want to. Judge Sam Davis Tatum said that out of 14,500 young people who had come before his juvenile court in Nashville, Tennessee, in 20 years, only 8 of them had gone to Bible school and church services regularly with their parents. To do right way. Young people, in one of the states of the Union, they will not allow the Bible to be read in the public schools. But when you go to prison, that's the first book they give you. And so I tell young men often, if they don't want to read the Bible and study it now, wait a little while, they'll have an opportunity. Don't be that way. 2 weeks ago, I sat and listened to 4 convicts whose sentences together amounted to 294 years. One of them had killed a person. Each one of those 4 boys said, "I wanted to be the big dog. And I tried to do it by stealing, by lying, by cheating, by doing everything else. I thought that was the way to lead boys. But it didn't work because here I am." Young people, you be the right kind of person. The last thing I would dare you to do tonight is to live for Jesus. Now, out of all of the things I've encouraged you to do tonight, there's not one that will even hold a penny's worth to the value of this last one. I dare you to live for Jesus. No matter what the other young people do around you, live for Him. Know Jesus better than you know anyone in the world. Know this book better than you know any book in the world, the Bible. And when you take it to school with you and read it in your study hall or something, and someone else smiles or grins or laughs a little bit, let them make fun of you if they will. They would like to be like you. Young people, don't try to make a show of your Christianity, but you just be a fine, wholesome, upright Christian. That's all God wants you to be. is to just live for Jesus and make your life the greatest blessing to humanity that it can possibly be. Don't follow the crowd, but follow Jesus. When Jesus went to the cross, He didn't follow the crowd. Because on the cross, He lost the greatest popularity contest that was ever held. Who were His friends at the cross? Who were they? Jesus didn't follow the crowd, but He did right because the Heavenly Father wanted Him to do right. Young people, all of the money in the world won't buy rent in heaven for 30 seconds. But you can be washed in the blood of the Lamb and live there for an eternity. And the beautiful part of it is that God has given you that opportunity. Wouldn't you like to be a Christian more than anything else in the world? It is the greatest life in the world. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I would that you would take advantage of every opportunity you can to be the greatest person in the world that you can be. How great can you really be? Never underestimate what you can be with Christ. Because He says, with Him all things are possible. You can do all things through Him who will strengthen you as you walk the way. He will walk hand in hand with you. He will live the life with you. And there is nothing in the world that can compare with it. It is the greatest life in the world. Galatians 2 verse 20. I have been crucified with Christ, yet it is not I that live, but Christ liveth in me. Do you know of anyone you respect more than a Christian? I doubt if you do. And would you not want to be that person that is respected of your friends more than anyone else? There was a young man who thought that he could fool the wise old man. And so he took him a little bird in his hand. He cupped his hand so that the little bird was inside. And he thought to himself, I will go to the wise old man and say, Old man, is the little bird alive or is it dead? If the old man says, it is alive, I'll take it in my hands and crush it, and it will be dead. But if the wise old man says the little bird is dead, I'll open my hands and away the bird will fly. And either way, he'll be wrong. And so the young man went to this older man, the wise old man. As he held the little bird in his cupped hands, he said to him, Old man, is the little bird alive or is it dead? The older man thought for a moment and he said, As you will, young man, as you will. You're the greatest people in the world, young people. But I would that you would know the greatest life in the world. If you would believe with all of your heart that He is the Christ, confess the greatest name in the world and be buried with Him in baptism, you can be a new creature. You can live this life. You can be His. He will call you His. You will be a Christian and nothing more. You will be a member of His church, the only one which He purchased, Matthew 16, verse 18. And you can go to heaven and live with Him. I want to go to heaven and live more than anything. Would your life be right with Him tonight, or would you give it to Him? Or would you dare do anything else? I dare you tonight to be a Christian. I don't care how big you are, boys, or how fancy you think you are, girls. Tonight you stand before the judgment of God. And what would your pronouncement be? Would you live for Him? I would tonight that you would make a decision and do nothing more than just come when we offer the invitation, step out into the aisle and say, I give myself to you, Lord. Would you give yourself to Him tonight? How big are you? Just think. As together we stand and sing, would you come?